And when we look at crypto, I think the way that I see it to an extent is that there was this process of digitization and global encompassing that begins in the 1800s and 1830s and 40s and 50s with the telegraph. And it expands in the 20th century through things like Western Union starting to offer the first credit cards, which offer a layer of payments connectivity above individual banks, above the banking layer. The earliest payments cards actually come out of companies offering charge cards, and that becoming a network of companies that then reattaches to the banking system later. Also things like databases, so banks go from being analog pen and paper institutions that use a telegraph between them like you and I might use a tin can with string, and into something where the actual books of the bank themselves are digitized. And then later on you get the hardware revolution where instead of large massive databases stored at a small number of institutions, universities, governments, and eventually banks, you have a system where there are first of all point of sale devices in stores, and then later on cell phones in people's pockets. So suddenly if you're trying to draw a picture of the network, it starts looking less like a pyramid, or at least parts of it start looking less like a pyramid and more like a network with connections going all over the place. Now, there are still pyramidical aspects of that, and that's very important when you start understanding things like mobile money in sub-Saharan Africa, in part basically replacing one network of settlements processes at banks with a different network of settlement processes at telecom companies. But there's also that other thing. There's also Wi-Fi, there's also the peer-to-peer network of TCP/IP, there's also the potential to build a system where any computers that are connected with any connectivity at all can function in all sorts of different arrangements. And importantly in all of that, you've got the emergence of a new model, which is the client-server model, which is the idea that I could have a box underground in Utah somewhere, dark and air-conditioned and all that, and I could have a device in my hand and they have some relationship with each other. My email, I experience it, the thing in my hand, but it connects to a box somewhere very far away. You have situations where that isn't structured that way, and Hillary Clinton puts a box in her basement to run her email because she doesn't trust the box underground in Utah. But that infrastructure, I was actually just doing some home renovation and we bought some really nice containers for shampoo, and they were permanent containers so I don't have to look at annoying brand labels in my face every morning when I'm waking up. But I have a 4-gallon of shampoo now in the basement. And that idea of you have a client in front of you that's very pretty and permanent and very personalized, and then you have the big industrial size slop in the basement that you fill it up with. That's a very different thing than buying little shampoo bottles everywhere. And that model for technology is also important. What does it mean that in the past, when we thought of having our own computer, we thought of it as the laptop in front of us, but in fact, maybe there is this distinction built in that we haven't really teased out with our personal computers, even though that's obviously how a lot of the industrial strength architecture is running. So all of that is just to sort of lay the scene that whatever problem we're talking about, whatever historical moment we're in, we can look at the technological layer for insight and to understand some of the dynamics that then will play out with other political and social questions. So crypto to me is, in a sense, the finalization of that. Everybody's got a device in their pocket. Everybody can build software on top of that. Anyone can spin up a server. Anyone can do all this stuff in a way that is, to an extent, infrastructure neutral. You can do it on regular old boxes. You can do it through Wi-Fi. You can do it in a little self-contained network on whatever, and then show how it can be replicated upwards. In the past, you needed to be a bank. In the past, you needed to have specialized point of sale devices. All that stuff has been swept away. The generic internet, the generic box is now the starting point of analysis, and the pond that we're playing in is everyone. These are unique solutions to the problem. 0 is a unique solution relative to all the other numbers. The only way to win the Kobayashi Maru in Star Trek is not to play, that kind of thing. So this is a difference, in my opinion, of we've been digitizing for a while, but we haven't taken it seriously. We've been taking analog processes and carrying them into a digital world and waiting for that Wile E. Coyote moment where we realize we've walked off a cliff and need to look down and go, oh shit, And it doesn't happen consciously, but I think that's an extent to what crypto represented. What was the defining catalyst moment for the emergence of quote unquote crypto? I would say, if you're being honest, it's 2008. People talk about Satoshi Nakamoto publishing the Bitcoin protocol, which is obviously critical, but there were in fact a number of developments that happened before that didn't spark an entire new movement and hype, etc., that were arguably just as important. It's like someone saying, well, the day we added the airbag to the car was the day that it took off. Yeah, but what about the day you added wheels? What about the day you added the engine? That seems a very particular moment to say that was when a car became a car. And I think if you're being kind of more historically grounded, the obvious point is that it was the perfect storm. You had this big important fix of a problem that had been limiting the growth of the network. There were other problems in the past, but that was a big one. It happened right at a moment where this crisis had people hungry for alternatives to the traditional system. Trust in both government and traditional banks was at a generational low. And importantly, it was the first time that we've had a big seismic shift of that scale globally since the 30s. So, of course, this is going to be a moment where, almost like a form of social constipation, a lot of blockages that have been building up that needed a real shakeout to break through into the public consciousness, we're going to use that crisis moment to do so. So crypto, in a sense, is the point where the zit bursts through the skin and can now be popped. But it was coming for a long time, in my opinion. The seeds and germs of it all go back to the 1830s, and the FinTech frontier has always been there. Colleagues of mine in UNSW in Hong Kong, Ross Buckley and Doug Arner, talk about the stages, the generations of FinTech. We use that word now to refer to PayPal, Venmo and things, but it applied just as much to credit cards and debit cards and internet money and telephone banking and all those things at different points. And I think one of the points about understanding the long history of technology is the people who are in charge of that stuff, going back to lawyers being one of the first technology brokers. If you can read and when no one else can read, you're basically a magician. And any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And if you're the one keeping the record of all the laws, even people like Blackstone and Bracton, people who've become famous in the legal world for writing legal treatises over development of the English common law, what they're doing is saying, well, I read all the laws. You did it and I did. I read literally every contract dispute that came through the British courts for 500 years. And when I say this principle is what they believe and say that's the line of best fit, I'm saying that with the authority of someone who's read more than most people get to read. Now, you can disagree if you want to, but you and whose army? You and whose research? So suddenly, even within the world of law, even in the world of common law, which is law made by the accretion of individual cases by judges, the ability to build the treaties, the ability to create a new form of media, the compendium, turns these people into legal gods, and we're still quoting them. And if they make a mistake, or if they say something stupid, or they didn't have a good relationship with their daddies, and then that manifests in the way that they talk about constitutional law or something, we're all living in the shadow of that mistake because they're the ones that mastered the technology to write the encyclopedia.